Welcome to another episode of Vision and Voices, where we delve into the intricate and dynamic world of family offices. I'm your host, Chris Mays, a partner at Armanino, one of the top 25 consulting and accounting firms. Here at Armanino, I have the privilege of leading our family office industry, helping ultra high net worth individuals and families navigate the complexities of wealth management, tax planning, and legacy preservation. In each episode of Visions and Voices, we bring you insights and expertise from leading professionals across various fields relevant to family offices, from legal experts and investment strategists to technology innovators and philanthropy advisors. Our goal is to provide you with the knowledge and tools to manage and grow your family's wealth effectively. Today, we have a special guest, Jeff Savlov. Jeff is the founder of Blum Savlov, LLP, and consults to business families, legacy wealth families, and the advisors who serve them. He brings more than 30 years of unique experience in sales and marketing, business ownership, entrepreneurial endeavors, and family dynamics and psychological training, along with a common sense style to his consulting work with families. Jeff holds a master's of social work from Rutgers University with the specializations in group dynamics and family systems theory, and has a postgraduate certification from the Institute for Psychoanalysis and Psychotherapy of New Jersey, now the Center of Psychoanalysis and Psychotherapy of New Jersey, where he is a member of the faculty. Jeff received an advanced certification in family business advising from the Family Firm Institute in Boston, Massachusetts, where he is recognized with fellow status. Jeff is the founder of the Princeton Family Business Consultants Group, an interdisciplinary group of professionals serving enterprising families across the U.S. and convening to develop best practices. In addition, Jeff has consulted on relationship and team dynamics with Fortune 500 companies such as Bristol Myers Squibb, Johnson & Johnson, and Schering-Plough. He also devotes a portion of his time to performance enhancement with corporate executives and elite high school athletes. Jeff, welcome to Vision and Voices.
Thanks, man. You guys took up the long version of that bio. Oh, my.
You specialize in balancing family dynamics with the management of wealth. Can you share some of the common challenges you see in families facing when it comes to managing wealth across generations?
Yeah, I like to say family is complex all on its own. When you add generational wealth, making decisions about who's getting what, how much, leadership, who's going to be in charge, who's not going to be in charge, when there's operating assets, even more complicated decisions around, who's going to get an executive position, a CEO position. Maybe the senior generation doesn't think any of the kids are qualified and is not going to give it to any of them. Or maybe the senior generation thinks, hey, my kids have my genes, I did it, they can do it, and they're going to hand it over to a group of people who aren't really qualified or able. And in all that is a lot of potential for strife and harm to family harmony and business financial prosperity.
So how do generational differences impact the way families approach wealth management?
People are living longer, so you can have 3, sometimes 4, really old and really young generations at the same time. And, you have the older folks who, maybe were around through World War II and maybe their parents were in the Depression and they were raised by people of the Depression. And it's all about keep it simple, keep it humble. Excuse me. Don't be showy or flashy and live beneath your means. That's not to say that the younger generations are all about materialism. Actually, the kids in their 20s right now are really focused on making an impact in the world and having more work-life balance. And then there's everything in between. So I don't like a lot of generalizations. I think it's easy to say, millennials, they're lazy, but I don't find them to be lazy. I find them to be really looking for balance and trying to make an impact in the world. But in the midst of all of those differences is, again, more potential for sort of challenges as a family owns stuff and makes decisions about how do we do this as a family ownership group I wonder if it might make a little bit of sense. I mean, you read a really long bio. To put my background in context, I'm not sure if it shows through on the bio, and I wonder if a minute or two might make sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because I remember when we had our prior conversation that I think you 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 come into this field not as an outsider, but your own family story is super relevant here. So yeah, why don't we do that? Go
Yeah,
ahead.
yeah, no, thanks. Quickly, dad was a blue collar guy working for other people. He learned printing in the army and working for other people in New York, saved up his money, got a house in the suburbs with some equity, and risked everything to start his own business in New York City. I was involved high school, college, on weekends, whenever I could, more and more as I got older. He was really stressed out of his mind and took it out on me because that's what happens in family. You can't yell at the employees, but you can always yell at your kid. And I was working real hard, not asking for money, really just trying to support dad to do this cool thing for the family. My mom found a psychologist at the time because she saw the stress my dad and I were going through. And she gave this information to me and my dad, said, hey, you guys should reach out to this psychologist. She has a specialty working with parents and kids in family businesses. And when we reached out, she said, yeah, I don't just want the two of you. I want mom, sister, and both your sisters. I look at families, even if they're not in the business, this is a family issue. Long story short, we went as a group. A lot of intense stuff came up about my dad growing up with a father who was the only survivor in his family of the Holocaust. So my dad was raised by a guy who lost everything, super stressed out, a lot of hitting with the belt and that kind of stuff. And I didn't know my dad grew up like that. In these meetings, my dad said, when he was going through all that, he made a commitment to himself that he would never hit his kids. And in that split second, I mean, it was transformational for me. I just thought, man, what an angry kind of dude. And then I said, wow, I didn't realize what a loving act was happening.
Right.
Yeah, he was yelling, but he never
It's
laid a hand on us.
effectively breaking the cycle.
Breaking the cycle, but I didn't know it. I just thought angry yelling guy. Now I see, oh my God, loving angry yelling guy who's not
Yeah.
touching any of us. He was 6'3", 285. That would have been pretty
Yeah.
rough. Anyway, it transformed. I mean, really, that stuff happens in Hollywood, right? Where in a moment in therapy. But this was, I mean, wow, right there. I said, this guy's been working really hard beyond, I think, even his capabilities to do something and break a cycle that's really hard for families to break. So it was transformational for us. I said, Dad, I love you. I always loved you. I was a little confused. I understand things a little bit better. Let's not work together. I want to go do my own thing. Let's just be father and son. Our relationship got much better when we didn't work together. I went into sales and marketing in the corporate world. But I had a really good run at a young age, but I kept thinking, man, if I could do what that psychologist, what she did for us, if I could do that for families, what a career, what a calling, right?
Right.
So
Right.
moved back home with mom and dad in my late 20s, which was really interesting having them as roommates. We all matured and it was really very positive. Went back to grad school, studied family and group dynamics, trained as a family therapist, did the psychoanalytic training you mentioned earlier. 30 years ago, I started a private practice doing talk therapy, and I really thought that's where I was going to stay. And just by coincidence, 30 years ago, a couple of my earliest clients just happened to have really significant wealth. I got to know them as a therapist in really deep ways. And I saw that there were these dynamics that weren't just about me and my dad, but I saw that when families have some kind of wealth or business and they're spending all the family time plus the business financial decision-making time together, there's a whole other set of challenges. And so I started 30 years ago to really, not as a therapist, I have that background, but as a sort of coach, educator, facilitator, work with these families to develop healthy communication and high functioning family ownership groups and really help them to look at the common pitfalls. And over the last 30 years since I had this idea, other people have too. And there's the Family Firm Institute, and there's the Family Office Exchange, and there's the Purposeful Planning Institute. And there's a lot of organizations where professionals have come together to say, hey, this isn't just about tax minimization and growing assets. It's also about how do we help these families stay together and have long, healthy, family legacies in addition to their wealth. So hopefully that wasn't too long-winded.
Yeah, no, I mean, a couple of things I'd like to pick apart there or spend a little bit of time on. I mean, I think the first, maybe more of an observation for me, but is you never know what someone's going through, right? And you clearly didn't have the history of what your dad was going through, and hence his behaviors towards you. And it's just, I guess it's like, so lucky maybe, that you were given a window that at a point in time when you could actually connect with him and see that, and then have some shared understanding of where he was coming from.
Yeah, you could say if we didn't work together, we might never have had the opportunity to seek help and find that out. So it all worked out for the best. But it was a great opportunity. He's not a therapy guy in his generation, and he went with it because he saw that, our relationship was being hurt by his behavior. He didn't totally understand it, but he loved me enough to go to therapy, which you definitely didn't do in his day, because that's what my mom said you better do.
I mean, I can see, inside of our client base, the first generation wealth perhaps being like your dad, less interested, or less, not just not wanting to go through therapy, right? That hey, and especially maybe the older generation, like, hey, we did what we had to do, we survived, and we've now achieved this, and now you're being given all of these advantages that we didn't have, and maybe therapy is a harder pill to swallow for some.
Yeah, and I should also make the distinction that the work I'm doing, it's coaching, it's education, it's facilitation, but it's not therapy. Therapy per se, you have a diagnosis and a bunch of other sort of rules related to licensure, and it's sort of focused on kind of a mental illness that's being diagnosed. There's a lot of technicalities. Put that stuff aside. I really moved away from therapy into this world where I have more flexibility.
Or coaching, yeah.
To go into the skills that I have as a family therapist and psychoanalyst and bring that with me, but also as someone who's comes from a family business and has had a lot of training around working with families like this. So it is different than therapy, and that helps sometimes the senior generation. It's asking for help, but it's not actually a shrink.
Yeah, right. Okay. Well, yeah, and I mean, I think that's the complexity with all of our client families. The family dynamic coupled with the economics, and it just it creates it creates a lot of wonderful opportunities for the family, but it also creates a lot of problems, some of which you alluded to. I think, in terms of, what are the strategies that you use to align varying perspectives of different generations inside of families?
It sometimes is generations, and sometimes it's gender, sort of mom and the daughters, and dad and the son. So it could be generations, it could be daughters. It really has to do with sitting down, getting everyone's sort of opinion about what's happening here and what do you want as a family? What makes a strong family? What makes a healthy family in your opinion as a family group? And I'll do exercises like that. And that's really where alignment comes from. What makes a healthy family? What is your vision for owning stuff together as a family? Some families I work with have operating businesses. Other families have just, real estate investments, trusts, a foundation with not an actual operating business, but they still need to develop leaders and all that. So I really back out of the money and the wealth and say, what makes a good family? What makes a good life? What are your values? The values that you're most committed to in living your life. And we get some clarity around that. Let's plug in. How do the assets fit in? How does the money fit in? But let's sort of step away from all that and just say, what's the most important to you in life when it comes to your family, and then sort of entrepreneurial or business endeavors. And that's really a great way to get alignment, is to step away from all the other stuff and just say, what's most important to you guys?
Well, it's interesting you say that, because I have some 80 and 90-year-olds that some are first generation, some are, second or some latter generation of the wealth, but that they would say, hey, if I could just get my sons and daughters, if they just had a healthy relationship, that would be satisfying to me. Because what's ended up happening in a lot of cases is the wealth it's driven apart that next generation, and they're no longer friends. They, brothers may not treat each other like brothers, they may not call each other, maybe in lawsuits together. And, it just, and yet their parents, like, the only thing they want out of this is like, could my, my kids get along, and
Yeah, no, I frequently see that. I mean, talk about 90-year-olds. I just did a gig last year with 98-year-old parents and 70-year-old kids, right? 70-year-old kids. The parents still had all the ownership and control. The 70-year-olds are at each other's throats and ready to retire themselves, and they still don't even have the ownership. And then you have the 40-year-olds in the third generation scratching their head. Their dad and uncle are waiting for ownership. They're in their 40s and they're still, just watching these two guys fight it out. And it's easy to set your kids up without realizing it. In this situation I'm talking about, it was a World War II veteran, so another really traumatized guy who just sort of left the war, put his nose to the grindstone, and worked super hard, a zillion hours a day, and built something with that energy. Never really did any work on the pain that he was in, and then just didn't talk about anything, including like mentoring the kids who are now 70, the brothers. He never mentored them, never taught them. They had to sort of watch him and figure it out. And it just set them up for sort of just fighting over decision making rather than doing something a little bit more intentional around how are we going to figure out roles for the two of you. It was one guy, the father. Now you have two. Who's good at what? Who's going to do what? How are we going to set this up? How are you guys going to make decisions together? No, it was just figure it out. And, in the first year of that engagement, both the parents died, which is one crappy way to get ownership.
Yeah.
And I really had to just help these guys. I mean, we would talk about not only running the business, but inevitably a conversation would devolve into the 72-year-old brother talking about when he was 13 mowing the lawn and the 11-year-old was squirting him out the window with a water gun, and he's still angry about it. I mean, this is what happens. There's like all the stuff that siblings have, regular siblings that don't have wealth or business, layered on top of trying to run a business, which is hard for anybody. It's complicated. It's challenging.
Well, it's funny. Okay, so in that, like most of our families, they give the wealth and the control too early. But in the case that you just brought up, I would say that that's too late. By the time they're 70, it's too late. I'm usually looking for, the transfer of control to happen between 40 and 55 years of age if there's an operating in there, and it all dependent upon what the older generation, where they are in their career life cycle. But, 70s, I think that's just, you're making people wait way too long in order to take control. So, in your experience, what are the most common sources of conflict within wealthy families, and how do you navigate these tensions while preserving relationships?
Most common, it's hard, really hard. There's so many variations because it's all, there's the standard things around, am I getting enough responsibility? I feel like I'm ready for more. You're not giving it to me, or you're a control freak and you'll never let go. A kid and a parent. I feel like there's so many flavors of how it plays out, but typically the conflict is typically caused by not enough real honest communication about sort of say in an operating business, what the plan is, right? What do I have to see to give you control and ownership? What do I need to accomplish in my life, financial security wise, to feel good about doing that? Right. And being transparent here. I've got $20 million. I feel like when I have $30 million, I can step away and you can have the business. And if you run it into the ground, I'm okay. But right. Being transparent about it, what you want and how far you are, in reaching that goal. And then for the next generation to be really, again, the word intentional about developing the next generation. Here's what I'd like to see from you. I'll do written development plans. I'll work these up with families. And so the next generation, however many there are, they're put in a role where they have some ability and they've proven themselves. And then you assign non-family executives to mentor and develop and assess. And you have real guidelines around what are the milestones to be achieved. If you don't achieve them, here's how we're going to support you to try. If it still doesn't work, we're going to have to rethink your involvement in the families don't do that often enough. So it's just kind of a mishmash, and people make one decision, from the senior generation when things are going well, and they communicate a couple of days later a totally different, decision or desire of what they want to see in the future because things didn't go well a couple of days later. And that is brutal for anyone who's working really hard to get ownership of something big and leadership, both, to feel like within a week it could be, this is coming your way, or no way is this ever happening. That's
Right. Yeah.
common
No,
and brutal.
but I liked what you said there about potentially interjecting member people into a governance system, which so you basically you're either decreasing the role of the familial relationship, and you're making it potentially more objective, at least in a business context, by having those outsiders have a role in the decision making there.
Yeah, and I'm all for, non-family kind of participation in governance, and that takes a lot of trust. The non-family member has to believe that this person who might be my boss in 10 years is going to be okay with me saying, hey, you're really falling short in this way, or you've really got to develop in that way. So that takes real trust to have non-family employees that can do that. And one way to deal with that is to sort of have that kind of trust and confidence. Another way is I'm a big believer in boards. And while a lot of families are very skeptical and fearful about fiduciary boards, no matter how educated and how many MBAs they have, you say fiduciary board, and they feel like someone has the right to fire them and take over their company.
Right.
And they get so scared. So I talk about, non-fiduciary advisory boards, right? You're going to give, somebody lunch and a few bucks 4 times a year, but we're going to get people that have not your golf buddies, not your friend from high school, people you don't know who have real experience, and
Relevant experience,
and have them have conversations. And when they see how those conversations go, and that these outsiders are saying, it looks like your daughter has way more skill than your son, and he's the president, we don't get it. Right. And it's not coming from the daughter or the son. That's powerful.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. And I mean, I understand why some families are reticent to do that for a variety of reasons, privacy reasons, all sorts of things. But outsiders in the context of a board, either a real fiduciary board, if to the extent there's an operating company involved, or like you said, more of an advisory board, makes a ton of sense, because at the very least they'll help you see through your blind spots, or they may help you see through your blind spots and make outcomes more, at least the perception be that they're more equitable against the upcoming generations.
Yeah, I'd be interested in your thoughts on this. I definitely see a lot of these guys, and I say guys because it's typically these entrepreneurial men that have this configuration. The women are getting more and more leadership roles certainly in the family business world, and there is generally a difference where there's more of an openness to sort of emotions and relationships and those kind of dynamics. But the sort of narcissistic male entrepreneur who's been so successful and believes he's right about everything. The fiduciary piece is scary, but even hey, please don't get your golf buddies. They're like, what do you mean? I know these guys, they know me, they know the business. And I'm like, you're losing the whole thing. You need people that aren't your best friends for your kids to buy into the feedback they're getting
100%.
too. And your golf buddies aren't going to tell you the hard stuff. They don't want you pissed off on when you're golfing, and they don't tell you the truth. So that's a hard one. Do you see any of that?
Oh, 100%, 100%. But I mean, we are seeing, and I can think of a couple examples right now where we've got some women entrepreneurs where we're seeing the same. I mean, we're seeing some of the similar problems, and just again, they can't see their blind spots, and they're not seeing how their behaviors are impacting their kids or their kids' kids, and the interjection of outsiders to give some objectivity to the process, as well as trust to those up and coming family members. I think my most successful, families, like families that had success longer than 3 generations, in fact, I can't think of one that doesn't have some form of outside advisor. And I understand why you don't want the golfing buddies, but I actually think the golfing buddies are better than nothing.
Okay, yeah, could be.
So it wouldn't be my wish list, but it's so funny. This work you do, it is like, this is not the work we do. Or we're working on the systems, doing the accounting, tax optimization, estate planning, or providing outsourced family office services. But the Achilles heel in all of this is that, like, as good as, like, we could get every aspect of the role we do right, and if the family implodes because of the problems that you address directly, it doesn't matter what we've done. It's
Right.
It's secondary or tertiary. I mean, getting the family dynamic right and having thoughtful, productive of wealth as well, and control, to the extent there's an operating company involved, and even as it's like, how are you going to share the Hawaii home or the Aspen house with your sons and daughters, and then their sons and daughters, right? So the grandkids, effectively, because some of these family assets,
they're tough to share.
They're tough to share. 100%. Everybody wants the ski house during winter break,
right?
And not everybody can. And so, like, even
my head is filled with images of clients fighting over just that. And then you have whoever created the wealth and bought that asset, that home, has given everyone, even if they're not alive, there's this sense of, not that they're trying to give a guilt trip, but hey, I got this for you guys, share it and enjoy it.
Yeah, right.
They have this romantic, loving idea that's really from their heart. In reality, the second or third generation after them is like, this is so tough. We can't sell it. Grandpa, grandma would roll over in their grave, and it tortures them. It's not as romantic in real life when you've got to share, 25 people share the winter break at Aspen House.
Yeah. No, right. I mean, yeah, we were spending a lot of time focusing on the operating assets, and I was trying to think of, like, what are some of the other problems that we have beyond families that have significant operating assets, and it's these kinds of things, or it's the aircraft or the yachts or whatever it may be. But yeah, I think you're 100% right. There's this romantic notion of, hey, look at this gift I'm giving the family, and yet, without thinking through, like, it's not going to be that great a gift, and it's actually going to create more turmoil and more conflict if it can't be equitably shared. And as soon as you get past a certain number of offspring, then it that's going to create the challenge.
Chris, what is the road to hell paved with?
I have no idea.
Oh, you never heard this expression? The road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Oh yeah, of course. Sorry, yeah.
I was setting you up for an easy one.
You set me up with an easy ball, and I didn't get the prompt.
That's all right. Yeah, no, it is.
So
yeah, go ahead.
So I was thinking about some of the other family situations that we've faced before, and we've had, of course, I mean, a multitude of different family-based issues where there may have been multiple moms and creating kids with the same father, or vice versa, and there's challenges between those two sets of kids. And how do you deal with, like, some of those kinds of issues where it's it's kind of deeply entrenched inside I mean, effectively the genetics of the family, but where there was some kind of divide in the family which separates them. But in the specific instance I'm thinking about, the patriarch would like everybody to get along, and yet there's clearly a division: first mom, second mom.
Yeah, that stuff's tough. It's not unusual that I'll come in, and, like I said, I'm not doing therapy, even though I have those credentials, and I will refer to local family therapists for situations like that. Sometimes you need to really sit down and dig heavily into that stuff in a really therapeutic way to get past it. But those are really tricky situations. And if there's conflict with, like, the older kids because now dad's with a younger mom and has his younger family, and dad's all into the younger, again, staying with the male example, because I see this most often. There could be a real split between his sort of older kids who maybe were there when the wealth was being created and didn't experience it so much. And now he's with this new wife and these little, newborn 2-3-year-olds and traveling the world like they never did, and without them. And it can tear a family apart. It takes real work to keep that together. And I do see it work well. I see really enlightened people who are aware of the dynamics, and they go out of their way to express love to the older kids and to help them understand. And hopefully with the ex-wife's help, right? If they're still at least talking, the mom and dad of the first relationship, they can really do a lot to help this along. The relationship between the first marriage, between those partners, even when there's a lot of acrimony, if they can do what's best for the kids, that's really the biggest opportunity. Can you guys stick together enough, even if you hate each other, so that your kids are not wrecked by what's going on between the two of you? But it's hard, and yeah.
So okay, so let's get back into succession planning. And for these families that have multiple offspring, like, and let's say the business owner, matriarch or patriarch, comes to you, how do you approach succession planning?
So I always like that psychologist that didn't meet with my dad and me and made sure my sisters, I opened it up big. I want the kids there early when they're just meeting me. I don't even like to meet just with the wealth creator, which they'll often try to do. I'll make a case for even just a first get to know you. Do we even want to have another call with Jeff Savlov? Can you bring your spouse, maybe a couple of the kids? The ones that do, yeah, that makes sense, are really, that's like almost like a litmus test for prognosis. The ones that are like, no, just you and me first, I don't want anyone else in it. It tends to be a poor prognosis, although it can work. But I try to open the system. I try to find out what do people want in this world? What do you understand? What questions do you have that you've never been able to ask? And so allowing people to just ask questions about the world that they're in, what the possibilities are for the future, just some simple questions can really start to calm things down. And then when you look at what do you really want out of life, and one really simple thing that sounds so ridiculously like business-like and simple, but it's super powerful, is explaining the difference between a manager or someone who's working day-to-day hard in a business or creating a new business of some sort, or an owner who maybe goes to quarterly meetings and maybe is getting some information once a month about what's going on. And that idea often isn't even presented to the next generation. Some of you can be owners that don't work, and others can really be in there. And the ones who are in there working will get a salary, and the people who are owners will get paid this other way, and we'll have a formula that makes it. And some of you might be owners getting paid the owner way, but also have a salary because you're doing a really intense job. And I can't tell you how much positive effect that little discussion has had in the 30 years I've been doing this.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Our most successful families, they train the kids and grandkids, or the grandkids at this point is actually the great grandkids at this point. They train the great grandkids starting at 16 years of age to be good owners.
Yeah.
And they show up at the annual shareholders meeting, and they're apprised of the quarterly, there's some kind of quarterly financial review, and they're really teaching the skills that are required to be a good owner. And it's not until they finish or secondary education that they might even entertain entering the business. And if they enter the business, then then they go through the natural progression. So the only birthright is to be that eventually they'll be an owner, and so they're taught to be good stewards of this operating asset versus actually working in the business. But so I do think that setting that expectation, providing that understanding of these different roles and how you might be involved, because a lot of times I think some of the family members just feel disenfranchised because they don't feel like they have any role in the business. They don't have it's just like, hey, am I getting my check? When's my next check, or whatever it is. and they don't have any feedback loop in terms of what a true owner would have.
Yeah, and that's really it. It's culture, working on a family culture that will go through the generations, and structure, governance, which doesn't have to be a bunch of suits around a big, boardroom. Governance can be regular family meetings, education for the younger kids and not just the older kids. And I'm a big fan around what you can do before kids even turn 5 years old, kids under 5, to start developing them for this ownership mindset. And at that age,
Yeah.
it's really expecting them to be accountable and to pitch in around the house, but also telling them stories about what grandma or grandpa did, telling them stories like out of a storybook, but only it's grandma or grandpa or great grandma and great grandpa. And you can tell stories to kids at 4 or 5 years old that make a lot of sense without talking about money, but letting them know that you come from a generation of, generations ago, family members who worked really hard and created something. And it's really beautiful what you can do. I had a family that was into demolition in the Midwest, and they had a big family meeting. I had done a lot of work with them. Things were going really well, and they were going to be outside by a lake in a big tent. The weather cooperated. It was beautiful. But as we're getting closer, I was saying, you got to bring the 3 to 8-year-olds in that generation. And they were just like, are you insane? This is over their head. This is going to bore them. I'm saying, you got to do it in a way that is useful to them. But you can start to develop an ownership, a stewardship mindset with kids that young. And when I explained what I was going to do, they gave me a chance. And I had the older generation, 20s and 30s, inside one of the walls of the tent. They took pictures of all the family members back to the founders, and they made a giant family tree with big 8x10 photographs, and they made it on the inside of the tent. And just informally, moms and dads and older brothers and sisters and cousins were just sort of say, hey, look, here's your mom and dad, here's your mom and dad's mom and dad, and here's their mom and dad. And it was all real. And then I had a big screen, a big display in the tent, and I took this 60-minute video that was on their website of buildings and bridges just getting blown up and crushed down.
Right.
And you can't do better by a 3 to 8-year-old.
Yeah.
They were just like cheering and just loving it, but they didn't understand it. And I said, hey guys, was that really cool? And all the kids were like, yeah. And I said, I want you to stand up. And they all stood up. I want you to face all of these moms, dads, uncles, aunts, cousins in the room. There was another 50 people in the tent. I said, okay, anybody who's ever had something to do with blowing up a bridge or a big building, please stand up. And suddenly, 80-year-old aunts and uncles are standing up, 20, 30-year-old cousins. And these kids that's how you talk to an 8-year-old.
Right.
Whoa, this is super cool. And you guys do that? You're getting their heart into what the family's about without talking about money or inheritances or trust funds. You're just saying, we do this. This is cool. And look, even old men and women that you thought just sit around and fart all day, they're involved in doing this. And to an 8-year-old, that's awesome.
Well, yeah, okay, that's an awesome story, because I can see how you're starting to plant the seeds of legacy and purpose, or you're interjecting that at a very young age into the conversation, making them part of the process. But look, many families, they struggle with defining a shared sense of purpose and legacy. Like, what are some other ways that you help families discover and articulate their collective purpose?
So I have these, just happen to have one in front of me, these decks of cards that have values on them. Here's tradition, and here's power. I don't know if you can see them. I'll just read a few. Creativity, freedom, nature, environment, family, cooperation. And I'll do this, and I'll help parents do, you'd be surprised, young kids, even 5, 6, with some help, can understand these ideas and really take a look at each person in the family. Which of these are the most important to you in your life? And how do you live your life by these most important values? And how do you fall short is a really important thing. This is really popular in this world that I'm in, is to do values work with families. I think if you're only saying, how do you live by them? And you're not asking, how do you fall short? Then you're missing something. How do you fall short? And now give me 1 or 2 specific things you're going to do to better live by this value, if indeed it truly is that important to you, because that's what it all comes down to. If you're not walking the walk, grandma, mom, and dad, the kid's going to see what you do and not what you're saying. So you got to walk the walk. So values work. And again, some of the exercises I said earlier, and again, with really young kids, what makes a good family? What makes a good life? And then when parents get comfortable, I'll move into with young kids, with teenagers, we'll start to talk about money. So, but first it's not money, it's sort of values and legacy and all these cool stories. And then we'll move into money. And, grandma, when she started her cookie business, it was really small out of her basement and she was helping people in their neighborhood. And then it grew. And then investors came with a lot of money and she got a big factory and it grew and grew. And grandma started making a lot of money. She went from really just struggling to pay her bills to making a lot of money. What do you think is cool about having a lot of money like that for grandma? And what do you think was hard for her? And even young kids can say some brilliant things about downsides of a lot of money. And parents are routinely shocked that even 7, 8-year-olds can come up with about benefits of having a lot of extra money, but also downsides. And it's tapping the natural wisdom of young kids. I think the most underutilized, or the area with really lacking focus in this area of family wealth, it's the opportunities for what you can do with young kids to really put a foundation of grit and resilience and accountability.
I 100% agree. I think we, as an industry, one underwhelming gap is the education for that next generation. I hear a lot of people, talking to it, but I haven't found there's no go-to for developing or educating these next generations. And I do think that there's a lot of opportunity in that. So, looking ahead, what trends do you see emerging in the family wealth management space, and how do you think these will impact family dynamics and the management of, shared businesses or shared assets?
Well, certainly where people just looked at me cross-eyed like I was insane when I was talking about things you could do with a 2, 3, 4-year-old 5, 10 years ago. In the last few years, I'm getting couples coming to me and they're like, this makes sense to us. There's got to be things we can be doing this early to sort of prepare them to be responsible kind of inheritors one day. And so that's, I think, the fact that there's movement in that direction is great. There's also there's a whole movement, so it's called Wealth 3.0. Sort of 1.0 was, the old school where you never said anything, you died, and then everybody went to an attorney's office after you died, and you found out who was president and who got the Aspen House and all that. That was 1.0, like no communication at all. 2.0, we certainly had a lot more communication, but there was this sense of scaring families, like, shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves. If you don't do the right things, it's all going to fall apart. And Wealth 3.0, which is being written about and talked about, and certainly in the organizations that I'm involved with, it's to try to help families really harness the positive side of wealth. It's not all negative. It's not all scary. Although, let's face it, it is tricky, and there is real harm can come with a lot of money and bad decisions. But there is a sort of a tendency toward let's look at the positives here and try to focus on how this can really serve us and the world. And I think that's just a great trend that's great for families.
So what advice would you give families just beginning their wealth, their how they integrate their family life and wealth, and particularly those looking to sustain their wealth across multiple generations?
Yeah, just open communication, let kids ask questions, give them enough information that's appropriate for their age. Again, I like to say you can talk about family wealth without even talking about money, and you can talk about money without using numbers. And if you think about that, there's a lot of opportunity there. It's the grandma's cookie story, talking about the story. What do you think about it? Let's go to the factory now. Here's grandma's house. This is where she started it. Here's the big factory. And you can blow a kid's mind. What do you think about this? And let them ask questions and talk about it, and just let their curiosity run wild, and just be open and answer their questions. So I think it's just it's so simple, but it's communication. It's letting them ask questions. It's supporting their curiosity at any age, right? Whether it's little kids or teenagers or college kids, and just finding ways to talk about what's going on and how it's going to affect them. That's the best simple thing you can do, and skills around money as they get older. Teach them to save, teach them how much do they want to spend. If it's a family value to give back, and pretty much all the families that reach out to me are kind of self-selected in that vein, don't just talk about giving money, but go out there. I took my kids to the soup kitchen when they were pretty young, and it was really stark to them to see, you know, a couple hundred people in a big room that are all really hungry, and this is maybe the one meal they get the whole day or for a couple of days, and to serve and to cook and serve and serve others in that way, and remind them not only of who these people are that are hungry, but Grandpa Hal, my dad's father, who, if he didn't escape the Nazis, and yeah, he lost his whole family, if he didn't take that risk and sneak as a stowaway on a boat to Mexico, we wouldn't even be here. Like, people took some real risks and worked really hard for us to be here. Let's give back to these people who are hungry, and let's make sure we appreciate what we have and do the right thing with that legacy.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Hey, so for folks that are interested in getting in contact with you, are you on Twitter, or are you on LinkedIn? Like,
LinkedIn, website. I'm sure you'll attach it to however.
Yeah, I'll put your LinkedIn handle and your website in the.
Those are great places. I write a blog that's actually really popular, goes out once a month, and we'll share it with clients that have a similar kind of need, or it helps their thinking in some way. And the families it goes to, it sort of helps them to kind of understand their situation and think about it in different ways.
Oh, right on. How do people get access to that?
On my website, or I can give you the link if you want to include it.
Yeah, we'll put the link in the show notes.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Jeff, super nice to talk to you today. And again, I'm really excited about this stuff. As I said, like, in what we do in our practice, we get 100% right, only for the family to not have the continuity or the family systems to make the business successful, or make the intergenerational transfer successul. And it doesn't matter what we did. The best tax planning, the best business structuring will be insignificant relative to the family dynamic. So, you know, really, really good to talk to you, and, you know, get a little glimpse into the kind of work you do.
Yeah, no, thanks for the invite. It's always fun to chat.
All right. Thank you very much.